Hi everyone, today let's talk about Microsoft falling off a cliff on earnings. Then we'll take a look at all the normal data and charts. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So Microsoft stock dropped big on a big cloud miss, overshadowing the better than expected earnings. You can see down 7.5%. That is a huge drop for Microsoft. Pretty uncharacteristic. Microsoft typically does quite well on earnings, but you can see here down 7+%, earnings per share beating, revenue beating, but the slowing cloud growth is definitely not great. Intelligent Cloud generated $28.5 billion, and you can see Azure Cloud up 19%. Not quite what the street wanted. Cloud services growing by 29%. Street expected 31%. So that resumption in cloud growth, not great. And for comparison, we did get Google up 29% on their cloud infrastructure this quarter. So that was the expectation. Microsoft should have been growing a little bit faster than Google, but that is weighing heavily on the stock. And then looking at all of the different pieces here, Azure cloud growth slowing, Dynamic Product Cloud slowing, Microsoft 365 slowing. Surge Plus and News did increase pretty decently, 19% versus 12% the previous quarter. Server products and cloud services still doing quite well. Did slow down slightly, but not much. And then really strong growth here in Xbox. Not a huge segment for the company, but that is really powerful. 61, 62, and 61% quarter over quarter. So powerful growth there. Overall, the quarter is not bad. This is just an expensive company in my opinion. It was already up 12% in 2024 compared to the S&Ps, so it's basically up in line with the S&Ps, and now it's going to be down fairly substantially relative to markets. So strong company, strong results, just not quite strong enough to justify that valuation. Moving over to the Fear and Greed Index, 42 from a 45. Markets continued to sell here today. We've been selling off. We did get a slight bounce, but we're expected more selling, and that is what we got. 125 EMA still sitting down around that 52.30 area. Probably where we're actually headed. Haven't been that low in a while. Last time we were there was back here at the beginning of June, so probably going to round trip that move. Strength, it's in greed. Breadth in neutral. Put call ratio, still hovering in fear, but this continues to trend higher day by day. And then volatility, extreme fear, trending higher again. I still think this is probably getting into that 20 range. Haven't gotten there yet. And then safe haven demand, extreme fear. People are buying up those bonds and trying to get out of equities. Similarly here with junk bonds. Did trend up a little bit out of extreme greed, still sitting in regular greed. Moving over to the earnings calendar, Microsoft beating on the top and bottom, P&G missing on the top, beating on the bottom, AMD doing very well, beating on both. They put out good guidance, people are liking that. American Tower beating Starbucks. They met expectations on earnings, and that was enough for them to pop. PayPal, big beat for them. They went up quite a bit today. Might take a look at that chart a little bit later. And then looking at tomorrow, of course, we have Meta, MasterCard, T-Mobile, Qualcomm, ARM, Boeing, Altria, Garmin, fun to watch. eBay is in there, as well as Etsy to round out some of those consumer stocks, see how the U.S. consumer is doing. But of course, the big ones here are going to be Meta, MasterCard, and Qualcomm. Moving over to the economic calendar, JOLTS job openings, way better than expectations. Consumer confidence, still better than expectations. Consumer seems to be hanging in there pretty well. For tomorrow, CPI for the Eurozone, ADP non-farm employment change, Chicago PMI, and then the FOMC here at 2 o'clock. That's going to be interesting. The question really for me is, does he signal a cut in September? If he does, I think markets will rally. If he signals more hawkishness, I think markets are going to tank. And then looking at Thursday, start to get into that unemployment data, unemployment rate change for the Eurozone, initial jobless claims for here, some economic data, global U.S. manufacturing PMI, manufacturing employment, and then of course all the employment data on Friday. Moving over to Max Payne. Max Payne is at 547, stock price 540, so we're way below. Bottom of the calls here is 539. We're basically there. That's only $1 lower from here. This doesn't hold a ton of weight when you have huge catalysts like mega cap earnings and the FOMC, but it is something to pay attention to. It seems like there is not a ton of bearish sentiment past that zone right now. Put call ratio did go up a little bit to 2.3. Overall, not a ton of options, but something to pay attention to. Kind of bullish from this 535 to 537 area. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps, you can see the big move down on earnings from Microsoft. But then we got a little bit of bounce out of Microsoft, which is pushing markets up a little bit here after hours. I don't think it's going to sustain. Clearly, the level here for the S&Ps is that 55 EMA at 541.25. We did close above it at 542, tested it again in that after hours price action. I still think we're going to get down to this trend line here around 536, get a dip low, touch that zone, find a little bit more base before we see any kind of upswings. So this still looks like a consolidation dip low. We already had the consolidation, first move down. I would expect at least one more leg down. And I don't think this after hours price action is going to be able to change this short-term trend. So overall, still looking bearish. We're in this downtrend here, structurally starting to see cracks on those medium time frames on the daily chart. On the hourly, of course, everything is quite bearish still. Moving over to the Tasty charts here, you can see that same 55 EMA that we were just talking about. Tested that level. Here it's at 540.62, so a little bit lower. And then you can see that 89 EMA sitting at 531.32, lowest ATR band. We still haven't touched that yet, which is partly why I still think we're not in that kind of capitulation style move like we saw here. Eventually you expect to touch that before you see a resumption. Hasn't happened, and that lowest ATR is sitting at 533.95. So still plenty of downside potential here on the daily chart. Bearish momentum, no real volume today, bearish ATRs as you would expect. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, didn't quite get to that lowest ATR band. That is at 532.64. Again, it just seems like we're going to get there. We've been touching it, move higher, touched it again, slight move higher. Would expect one more push there. Hasn't happened yet. Momentum did bounce slightly, but I just don't believe it fully. So still expecting more downtrend. ATR resistance here is at 549.93. Moving over to the NASDAQ here, you can see the same thesis. Big selling early in the session, as we expected. We talked about it yesterday. Hit the level, 454.40. Bounced from there slightly. Hit it again after hours. Bouncing again a little bit from there slightly. And it is actually up slightly after hours, which is bananas to me. Overall, I still think this is very much a downtrend, and you can see it here. All the EMAs and SMAs stacked on top of each other. Very much a true downtrend on the hourly chart. And then looking at that daily chart, you can see that 144 EMA sitting down there at 446. Based on this chart, that's where you would expect it to go. Momentum is bearish, RSI is bearish, volume bearish, and we're not oversold yet, 35.35, so you got about 5 more points of downside. You could get one more stack candle, the down move, which would be your second day continuation. Makes sense. Then you get a third day, a little bit weaker push, hit that level, and then you could see what happens from there. Of course, it all depends on the FOMC tomorrow, but that's what makes sense to me. You can see consolidation, 2 days, big push down. Second day continuation, consolidation, 2 days, big push down. Second day push here, third day wick, and then I could see maybe a stronger relief rally off of that level. Overall, still looks bearish. Looking at the Tasty charts here, we were looking for a potential touch of that 144 EMA at 446.03. Didn't quite get there, so we're still at this level, at that lowest ATR band, which is at 458.68. Definitely bumping into that zone. Doesn't mean we can't overshoot it. Hit that lower band. Momentum still very bearish. Did get some volume here, downtrending, ATR stops rolling down. So everything still says bear trend, even though we're hitting that lowest ATR band. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, didn't quite get there today. So expecting a little bit more downside move. That lowest band on the 4-hour chart is 448.95, which is about $10 lower from here. So another 2 to 2.25%. Hit that zone, then we could see that bounce. That would correlate more with the other levels that we talked about on the TradingView charts, as well as that 144 EMA. ATR resistance here, 467.60. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. The Russell got an inside candle, 0.38, about 84 cents on the day. So slight bounce there. Momentum still bearish. RSI still hovering, but below the SMA. So still a bull trend, still hanging out in the zone. 221.49 continues to hold as a zone of support. Tested that level again here today. 2 days in a row of that zone holding. Down just a little bit after hours, but still looks like consolidation, but holding those levels. And then looking at the Dow, slight pop here, 0.47. Falling a little bit after hours. Momentum bullish, RSI slightly bearish below the SMA, but still hanging out pretty close to it. So we'll see if it gets that final push up to the trend around 412. Still looks like it could do it, but that after hours price action definitely hurting it a little bit. Moving over to AMD and PayPal for stocks that moved here today, we got AMD up 7.35% after hours. They had good earnings. They talked about how their server storage continues to grow, and you can see momentum was already swinging to bullish, so you could argue that it was bound to happen. You can see this trend line broke here on today's session, and then the after hours price action hitting that 21 EMA. You could argue that this is still pretty sideways choppy with a high, lower high, or a lower high here, and now you have a low, lower low. So this could eventually be met with sellers, but earnings can reset things. Got some decent volume there. And then looking at PayPal, huge jump with the pre-market earnings today, also up 8.59%, huge volume momentum. It's in this downward channel here and it is hitting that upper resistance. But again, earnings on huge volume, maybe you get a slight pullback and a bigger push, and then eventually get back up to that 70 area. Overall, still very much a downtrend. Seems like you have a solid bottom around 50, and now we're pushing back up into that 70 range. Solid base here, and maybe this starts to show some strength into the medium term. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft, you can see Apple was up 0.26, giving some of that back after hours. Now it's negative at 217.41, back below the previous day's close. Momentum still swinging to bullish, so this still looks okay for another push higher, but these earnings have not been favorable, especially for big tech, and that is starting to weigh on it a little bit in my opinion. And then you can see Microsoft, it's only down 3.38% on that 12-hour candle, showing that after hours price action. So it's recouped about half of those losses. Pretty interesting there. You could see this was very much a downtrend. Structurally, it had broke down here, retested the 200, broke down. So overall, still very much a downtrend. Touched that next level at 394.22. And then looking at it on the daily chart, you can see that 200 SMA sitting there at 402.56. Definitely touched that after hours, and you can see it's at 407. So we're right here in the middle of this range, right here in this consolidation as well. Momentum still very much bearish. RSI still very much bearish. I think we'll get to oversold conditions. Didn't quite get there at 31.7, and I would expect continuation lower on that earnings. We've also been talking about how this structure has officially broken. We're well below these trend lines. We're going to break that 144 EMA, and now we're going to be around the 200, which is likely to break tomorrow in my opinion. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA here, we got Tesla down 4%. Big move down, momentum bearish, resumed that bearish move. We saw the bullish day yesterday, gave all that back, filled the gap. So short-lived, which we did expect. We were looking for a consolidation high, eventually expected that to reject. Thought this might be a little bit stronger because of this really powerful move. Hold the higher low and then see what happens, which is still technically possible. But on a move like this, you would expect at least to push to that 214 area. A little bit more moved lower. RSI showing bearishness, and then you got the 200 sitting at 204.48. So 9 EMA seems to be your resistance. And then looking at NVIDIA here, massive leg lower, 7% down, broke well below the 106.64 level. Next level would be 95.74. My expectation was to touch that today, so that definitely happened, broke well below it. Maybe we go back and fill this gap at that level, 95.74. It is bouncing a little bit after hours. Let's go ahead and look at that on the 12-hour chart. You can see the 200 SMA sitting right there. Microsoft probably said something about CapEx spend and buying more NVIDIA chips, so it could be bouncing on that kind of news, or potentially the AMD move, getting a little bit of a sympathy play from that. Either way, found some support at that 200 on the 12-hour chart. Structurally, however, still looks very bearish with a clear topping pattern. Moving over to Meta and Amazon, both of these sold off here today, 0.5% and 0.81 respectively, and they are down more after hours on that cloud revenue report from Microsoft. Both of these bank on cloud revenue for their growth, and that is just not coming through this quarter, it seems. Google was down, Microsoft is down. Both of these are down after hours, pretty substantially actually. You can see Meta down about $8, and then Amazon down about $2, a little bit more than $2. So both of them down about 1% or more after hours. Momentum swinging a little bit to bullish, but RSI probably going to hit that SMA and sell. Amazon going to touch that 144 back at 177.82. And then if Meta continues to sell, the next level here is that 200 sitting all the way at 431.02. So lots of downside potential. Structurally, both of these look like they're about to roll down for some more downside action. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, staples dropping but holding the level, so still in this same very slow grinding price action. Momentum stepping down, RSI a little bit bearish there, but right now the level hasn't broken. And then looking at discretionaries, broke through here, got the continuation lower as we expected. Thought this was going to be a zone of resistance, and it was, and it broke down about 0.5%. Momentum still swinging to bullish, but RSI broken here. Probably going to head back down to this trend line around 181. Moving over to utilities and oil and gas products, you can see both of these looked good here, 0.5% and 1.3%. We expected to get to this level. We're up after hours. This is probably going to push to 74.04, so utilities looks good. And then staples, and then oil and gas, got the bounce here we expected. This has been a zone of support, like that support, continues to bounce from here. Want to see it get back above 145.92 and then start to push into that 154 area. I do think there is potential for a swing into that zone. Moving over to 20 and 50-day breadth, you can see both of these pulled back here slightly. Expected a little bit of rejection from here, didn't quite get it. 50-day completely flat there, up just 0.29, still in that same range, 69.78. Yesterday I was at 69.58, so basically flat, very slight trickle up. And it's interesting to see that divergence, 20-day rolling down, 50-day rolling up just slightly, so markets hesitating ahead of the FOMC. Moving over to the dollar on the hourly and the daily, you can see big wick high, got a new wick high, big move down, bearish on the day, still holding the level at 104.47. Probably going to touch that, and then we'll see what happens from there. Just looks like a break, push up, retest hopefully, and then a push up. As long as that happens, we should see a little bit more bearishness. This depends on the FOMC. If he's hawkish, we'll see the dollar rally, which it does look like it will do. And then if he's a little bit more dovish, we'll probably see this roll back down to the 103 area. Moving over to yields, both of these cratering here today, 0.98 and 0.84 respectively. Momentum and RSI both bearish on these. Interesting to see that 10-year closing at a new low relative to this previous low here in mid-July. 10-year, 2-year of course continues to close. This is a new low close, headed towards that 4.25 area, which is where I think we're headed before we see any kind of change in this structure. It does seem to be accelerating here slightly. Moving over to JNK and TLT, you can see JNK right in this zone of resistance, still cannot get above it, but still not breaking down. Tight consolidation in this zone. And then TLT bouncing 0.39. We expected continuation, looking for this trend line up here around 94.50. Again, heavily dependent on the FOMC, but it still looks bullish to me. Moving over to volatility, you can see MOVE Index moving a little bit higher here. VIX also bouncing off of that 9 EMA, so this is still a trend. Still expecting it to push into this 20 zone. Could happen tomorrow, could happen in 2 days or so. Tons of events with the FOMC and big earnings, so volatility likely to hit that zone. Probably some more selling to come. If this zone breaks, 2250 is the next level, and I do think that that is within striking range. You can see this previous high in April. That got all the way up to a 21.36, and that wasn't even a very dramatic move. I think this move might have a little bit more legs to the downside, so we'll see how it plays. Still looks bearish, which means that the VIX should be heading into this next zone, 20 to 22. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I did manage to lose just a little bit of money. Not bad considering that the NASDAQ was down 1.5% going into the earnings, and then it was down a little bit more during the earnings, and now you can see it's up about $1 after hours. Pretty surprising. I don't think that that dollar is going to last. I did overcorrect to that down move initially, so I'm in a little bit tighter spot. $4.53 on the put side for $4, and then call side for tomorrow, $4.61, which is a lot closer to the money than it was when I sold it. Still $3 out of the money with $1 credit, and then $4.64. Only $3 outside of that for $2 credit. So still room to adjust if we do get continued upside. I don't think it's going to happen though. So still playing to the bear side, and you can see the bearish deltas there. Russell still holding 223 for tomorrow for $2 credit. That's in a small profit already. And then XOP got the bounce there, so that was good. Made money on the day, profitable on the position here now. I'll continue to watch that, but I think it's already in good shape and should go higher. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of Microsoft earnings. Are they going to be able to make up some of those losses, or is this just another down move in a series of down moves and it's going to continue lower? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.